For 5 months, the only thing my ex-wife left me was silence. I used that time to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and started dating someone who made me believe that peace was real. But that peace ended the night Audrey came back. After being dumped by her wealthy lover, she wanted her old life back. When I said no, desperation turned ruthless. She launched a systematic campaign of sabotage, aimed squarely at the new woman in my life, trying to destroy her reputation and her composure. This fight was no longer about a lost love. It was about protecting an innocent person from her rage. When the person who was once your everything becomes an enemy who knows all your weaknesses, how do you fight? I'm Captain Jasper Hayes, U.S. Army, stationed at Fort Bragg. 14 years in the service teaches you to keep a level head, even when everything around you is blowing up. But training grounds and battlefields are a world away from real life, especially after a divorce. Here, within the four walls of my apartment, the enemies were silence and memories that refused to stand down. It was a Tuesday night. The cold October air pressed against the window panes, leaving a thin layer of fog. I stepped inside. The apartment was so neat it felt sterile. Books aligned on the shelf, the TV remote parallel to the edge of the table, the floor still smelling of lemon cleaner. The ticking of the wall clock cut steady, relentless beats into the emptiness. I'd just gotten back from my third date with Rowan, an elementary school teacher I'd met through a mutual friend. The faint scent of lavender from her scarf seemed to cling to my jacket. I sat on the sofa, a glass of water in my hand that I didn't drink. I just sat there, replaying our conversation. She hadn't asked if I was okay or what had happened. She asked about the book I was reading, the music I liked, my stupidest childhood memory. And for the first time in months, I laughed. A real laugh. A fragile sense of hope, warm like a small flame, began to flicker inside me. But as the silence of the apartment closed in, that flame dwindled. I stood and walked into the bedroom. On instinct, almost a reflex, my hand went to the nightstand drawer. Beneath a stack of t-shirts folded to military perfection, I pulled out an old photograph, its corners slightly frayed. It was my wedding picture with Audrey. We were standing under a wisteria arch, smiling, our eyes shining with a belief in a future that was supposed to be permanent. Looking at my own smile from the past, a familiar, sharp pain shot through me. Hope and pain. They were at war inside me. I placed the photo face down on the cold wood of the nightstand with a final, decisive tap. But I didn't need to see it anymore. The image was already burned into my mind. Memory never gives you a warning. I sat on the edge of the bed, the dim yellow light falling on the face-down wedding photo. And then it was like a switch flipped in my head, everything rewound a dozen years. I saw myself on a train platform, 18 years old, my uniform still crisp. Audrey stood in front of me, her cheeks flushed from the wind, her eyes red from crying. I hugged her awkwardly. Her hair smelled like apple shampoo, a scent so sweet it drowned out the garbled announcements from the station speakers. She pressed something small and cool into my hand, a brass compass. "So you can always find your way back home to me," she said. Her voice choked. Back then, to me, she was home. Later, in a canvas tent in the middle of the desert, I'd hold a small flashlight, its weak beam just enough to illuminate the words on the page. A letter from Audrey. Her soft script told me trivial things. The neighbor's dog had dug up the garden again. She'd burned a batch of cookies. I read every word. Those small details kept me grounded, pulling me out of a reality of dust and explosions. They reminded me that a normal world existed, and that a girl was waiting for me to come back to it. Then came my first leave. I spent every dollar I'd saved. The only thing I could think of was getting her a gift. Nothing big, nothing extravagant, just enough to say she was everything. I finally chose a silver necklace with a star-shaped pendant. I'll never forget her blue eyes, bright and shimmering. When she opened the box, they outshone any star I'd ever seen in the desert sky. She threw her arms around me, radiant, not caring about the price tag. For her, it was enough that it came from me. Back then, I believed our love was simple, pure, and permanent. But nothing is permanent. The change wasn't an ambush. It was more like erosion, slow, almost unnoticeable, until the foundation gives way. It started after I came back from my third tour. Audrey had a new circle of friends, the wives of businessmen and lawyers. Her stories began to change. Instead of talking about the book she was reading, she'd talk about Jennifer's new handbag, Todd's new car. "Must be nice," she'd say casually, her eyes fixed on a fashion magazine. Her complaints about my deployments changed too. They used to be filled with longing. Now they were tinged with resentment. "I had to go to another event alone," she'd say, a sharp edge to her voice. Those kinds of comparisons became more frequent. I still believed that as long as we had each other, the superficial things didn't matter. So when I had a short leave, I planned a camping trip to the Blue Ridge Mountains, where we'd had our first date. I packed the tent and gear, picturing us by a campfire, under the stars, just like before. I thought it would bring back the memories, bring us closer, but Audrey just looked at me and gave a faint, tired smile. "Camping, Joss? We're not in college anymore. Why don't we go to a luxury resort by the ocean?" I gave in. We went to the beach. But for the entire trip, Audrey was practically glued to her phone. She spent her time by the pool taking perfect photos for social media, then complaining about the weak Wi-Fi signal. I was sitting right next to her, but I felt 1,000 miles away. We were in the same place, but we were no longer together. Then, that night, everything exploded. An argument over money. Audrey wanted me to buy her an expensive watch, and I refused. She stood up, her eyes flashing. "Don't you get it, Jazz?" she yelled. "It's not just a watch. It's an image, a status. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck with some grunt, with no ambition." Grunt. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd faced live fire, stared death in the face, but I'd never felt a wound that sharp. That night, we lay in the same bed, but we each faced a different wall. The space between our bodies was only a few inches, but the distance felt wider than an ocean. I realized the compass she'd given me all those years ago must be broken. We were lost. In the months that followed, I tried to find our way back. I thought maybe the physical distance was the problem. I suggested we move to a new city together after my next deployment. A fresh start. She agreed, but the indifference in her voice should have been a warning. I ignored it. I clung to the hope that time and effort could repair the cracks. And then, my mission ended 2 days early. I drove all night, stopping for nothing, fueled by black coffee and the thought of a new beginning. A bouquet of red roses, her favorite, sat on the passenger seat. I pictured her surprise when I told her we could start looking for a house right away. When I walked inside, the house was unusually quiet. No TV, no music. Then I heard a soft laugh from the living room. It wasn't hers alone. She was sitting there, on our sofa, pouring a glass of wine for Julian Croft, a man I only knew from a few social gatherings. Julian's hand was resting on her knee, far too comfortably. They stopped when they saw me. Neither of them looked surprised. The bouquet of roses slipped from my hand, the petals bruising on the floor. "Audrey?" My voice was barely a whisper. She set her wineglass down. "You're home early." Her tone was flat, as if I were a guest who'd arrived at an inconvenient time. I tried. I asked about our vows, about the 12 years we'd had, about all the letters, all the promises. "It meant something," she replied, her voice cold. "But people change, Joss. I've changed." I stood there, the blood draining from my face, a ringing in my ears. The room started to spin. All those years, all those memories, gone in an instant. She moved out that weekend. It was fast and efficient, like a military operation. She took the designer clothes, the jewelry, the things she now considered valuable. Before she left, She placed the compass she'd given me on the coffee table. It sat there, gleaming on the dark wood, the same one she'd pressed into my hand on the train platform. Now it lay abandoned, cold. I picked it up. The needle still trembled, pointing north. But my home was gone, back in the present. My apartment. The smell of garlic and basil from the half-cooked pasta filled the air. The sound of my knife chopping vegetables on the cutting board was the only sound. I was getting used to cooking for one. The doorbell rang, sudden and out of place. I wasn't expecting anyone. Rowan had a late class, and my friends knew not to show up unannounced. I wiped my hands on a towel and went to the door. And there she was. Audrey. She looked different. Still the same blonde hair, the same blue eyes. But something was missing. The radiant confidence from before was replaced by a weariness that even her heavy makeup couldn't hide. The designer dress she wore was slightly wrinkled, as if she'd been in a car for too long. She didn't wait for an invitation, slipping past me and walking right in. Her handbag landed on the sofa with a soft thud. "You're still living like this?" she asked, glancing around with a judgmental air. "So, plain?" I closed the door, slowly. My entire body went on high alert, a soldier's reflex. I stood between her and the rest of my apartment. My safe space had just been breached. She either didn't notice my tension or chose to ignore it. She walked around the living room, running a finger over my bookshelf. "Still the same old books," she remarked. "You never change, do you, Jas?" "What do you want, Audrey?" I asked, my voice flat and even. I had no time for games. She turned to face me. A small, calculated smile played on her lips. She sat down on the sofa, crossing her legs, making herself comfortable as if this were still her home. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone that of someone bestowing a great favor. "Julian was a mistake, an expensive lesson. I realized all that glamorous stuff isn't everything. Family is what's most important." She paused, looking at me, clearly expecting a reaction. I just stood there, my arms crossed over my chest, letting her talk. I analyzed every word, every shift in her tone. This wasn't a conversation. This was reconnaissance, and she was looking for a weakness. My silence seemed to make her impatient. "I'm willing to give you a chance," she continued, emphasizing each word. "We can start over. You should be grateful, Jas. Not every woman is as generous and forgiving as I am." I took a breath, holding every emotion in check. Calm. Cold. My eyes never left hers. "I don't need that chance, Audrey." She blinked, the smile freezing on her face. "I've moved on," I added. "I'm seeing someone else." The smirk on Audrey's face vanished. It was replaced by undisguised shock, which quickly morphed into a quiet, simmering rage. Her eyes narrowed. "Someone else?" she repeated, her voice laced with contempt. "Who?" "Let me guess. Some simple, small-town girl who's happy with this boring life. Someone who'll never challenge you, never demand that you be better." "She has nothing to do with this," I said, my voice hardening. "And you have no right to judge her." "Oh, I have every right," she scoffed. "I know you better than anyone, Jas. And I know you'll come back. It's just a matter of time." "Your time is up," I replied. "This conversation is over. Please leave." I pointed to the door. She stood, her face twisted with anger. "You're going to regret this, Jasper. I guarantee it." She grabbed her bag and walked to the door. But before she left, she turned back, her eyes blazing. "Let's see how long she lasts." The door slammed shut, but her threat hung in the air. When the person who was once your everything becomes an enemy who knows all your weaknesses, how do you fight? Audrey's threat wasn't an empty one. She began her campaign almost immediately, executed with the precision of a military strike. The target. Rowan. First came the digital assault. Rowan received a message from an anonymous Instagram account. Inside was a curated collection of old photos of Audrey and me. Us in Paris, at a friend's wedding, me carrying her on a beach. The caption was short, engineered for maximum damage. He's still in love with me. You're just a replacement. Ask him about the compass he still keeps. It was a vicious psychological blow. She was using the very symbol of our love to sow doubt. Rowan showed me the message. Her face a mask of calm, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. A cold, sharp anger ignited inside me. Not for myself, but for Rowan. She had been dragged into a game she never chose to play. I told Rowan, "Don't reply. I'll handle this." When that attack wasn't enough to make Rowan back down, Audrey escalated. Her next move was more sophisticated, more cruel. She didn't cause a scene. Instead, she appeared at Rowan's elementary school as a potential benefactor, dressed elegantly, speaking graciously. I found out from Rowan's call that night. Her voice filled more with bewilderment than fear. Audrey had approached the most influential group of parents, praising the school and acting perfectly polite. Then, with a look of sad, sisterly concern, she began to plant her poison. "I'm truly happy for my ex-husband, Jasper," Rowan recounted Audrey saying to one parent. "After everything that's happened, he deserves to be happy. I just hope his new friend, Miss Rowan, will take good care of him. He's still very fragile, so easily taken advantage of in his vulnerable state." She never made an accusation. She only expressed concern. But the message had been delivered. Rowan was an opportunist, preying on a broken man. The whispers started, the sideways glances. This attack left no physical scars. It eroded trust from the inside out. "She's not attacking me, Joss," Rowan said over the phone, her voice low. "She's painting me as the villain in her tragic story. And the scary part is, it's working." But Rowan was not one to be easily broken. The next morning, she told me what she'd done. She didn't confront the parents individually. Instead, at the weekly staff meeting, she stood up calmly. "Colleagues," she began, her voice steady, "I'm aware there may be some rumors circulating regarding my personal life. I only want to affirm that my professionalism and my commitment to our students always come first. I believe our educational environment is built on truth and respect. Thank you for your time." She didn't defend herself, didn't explain. She drew a line with her own dignity. As I listened to her, my anger began to mix with admiration. I wasn't fighting to save a victim. I was fighting to protect a partner. That's when my anger truly solidified. Not a hot, explosive rage, but a cold, focused resolve. Audrey had crossed a line. She wasn't just targeting me. She was trying to destroy the reputation, career, and peace of an innocent woman. I had tried to disengage, but she had forced my hand. This war was no longer about my past. It was about protecting my present and my future. That night I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop and created a new file, naming it Operation Audrey. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of the Instagram messages, the time of Rowan's distressed call, the names of the parents Audrey had approached. Every action would be scheduled, every response controlled. The anger wasn't chaos, it was fuel, and I knew eventually she would pay for every game she played. I arranged to meet Audrey at a neutral location, a coffee shop, public, well-lit, no room for drama. She arrived 5 minutes late, a small move to assert control. I didn't greet her. As she sat down, I placed a small object on the table between us. The old brass compass. "This is the last piece of you left in my life," I said, my voice calm and final. She stared at it, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "I'm here to say this once," I continued, looking directly at her. "You made the choice to walk out of my life, Audrey. Now, keep walking. Leave Rowan alone. You have no right to tell me what to do," she scoffed. I didn't argue. I quietly took out my phone, opened an audio file, and placed it on the table, sliding it gently toward her. I hit play. A familiar voice filled the space. Audrey's voice. gloating to someone over the phone. Of course it's working. All you have to do is play the victim. That small-town school teacher won't know what hit her. Let's see how long she lasts. The smirk on Audrey's face froze, then vanished. The color drained from her cheeks. I stopped the recording before it finished. That's just one small file in a folder I've named Operation Audrey, I said, my voice as cold and flat as steel. It contains screenshots of your Instagram messages, a log of anonymous calls, and a list of the parents you approached. It's enough for a restraining order. And maybe, just maybe, enough to interest Julian Croft's lawyers in the kind of person their client is associating with. I looked straight into her eyes, where panic was now clearly visible. This isn't a warning, Audrey, I said distinctly. This is a final briefing. Get out of our lives. The controlled, unyielding force in my gaze seemed to finally break through. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes instead of anger. She realized she had completely lost control. She said nothing, just grabbed her handbag and left. That evening I went to see Rowan. I didn't hold anything back. I told her the entire story, from the compass to my final warning. I told you because you deserve to know the truth, I said. And I'll understand if this is all too much. I had given her an out, even though the thought of it tightened my chest. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window. Then she turned, came over, and placed her hand on my cheek. I believe you, Joss, not her, she said, her voice firm. Everyone has a past. What matters is how we face it now. A few weeks later, my apartment felt different. The air was no longer cold. We were putting books on a shelf together, and Rowan's laughter filled the silence. I took the box of Audrey's old mementos from the closet. I looked at our wedding photo one last time, not with pain, but with acceptance. I calmly placed it in the box, along with the old letters. It's done, I said, closing the box and putting it on the highest shelf in the closet. The past was packed away. Rowan smiled and handed me a small cactus in a pot. Something green for the apartment, she said. We set the plant on the windowsill. A simple gesture, but it was enough to signal that this was a new beginning to live, to grow, and to move forward. The late afternoon sun streamed in, filling the room with a warm, golden light. It wasn't a perfect, storybook ending. It was a start built on honesty, trust, and a peace I had fought to reclaim.